Alright, so we're going to go ahead and do another math lesson, and then we'll plan to do a reading lesson tomorrow and a writing lesson the following day. But I just wanted to get us through some more topics with our math lessons so that I can start assigning some iReady lessons to align with our bar graphs and picture graphs. So the objective for today is I can draw and label a bar graph to represent data. Relate the count scale to the number line. So this is a little bit different, right? This one mentions a bar graph, whereas we worked on picture graphs yesterday. Today we're going to be working on bar graphs, and you'll find that they're pretty similar, but they show the data in a slightly different way. So first, let's go ahead and start with a sprint. This is working on our fluency with adding and subtracting 5 and 50. So we are going to work on that right now. I'll give you 2 minutes to work through this. All right, so just 10 more seconds. All right, so wherever you got to is great. Just go ahead and keep note of how you did and hope to progress in the future. All right, let's go to our main lesson today. So let's start with our application problem. So it says A, use the tally chart to fill in the picture graph, right? So tally charts we've worked on over the past week, and then we can fill it in the picture graph that we worked on the concept of yesterday. So that's step A. So let's go ahead and just work on step A. So I'm thinking for this tally chart, I have this one group of 5 tallies, and then I count on 6, 7, 8. So 8, and that means Jose has read 8 books. And then for Laura, I see she just has one group of 5. So Laura has read 5 books. And then Linda, we don't have any data for yet. We might get some data for her later, but as of right now, it looks like she has read no books. And then I see my legend, it says each circle stands for 1 book. So now that I know that, I know I have to put 8 circles in the Jose column, and I have to put 5 in the Laura column. So I'll go ahead and do that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then for Laura, I go ahead and put 5 in her column. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into her column. So now this represents the data that is shown over here. And like we said before, this might be a slightly easier way to visualize the data, which is why we use picture graphs and why we use graphs in general. It shows the data in maybe an easier to interpret way. So let's move on to part B. It says, draw a tape diagram to show how many more books Jose read than Laura. So we want to do a comparison, right? So let's go ahead and draw some tape diagrams. I have Jose here with 8, and then I have Laura here with 5, and I made 8 be the larger tape diagram, right? So that we can represent and compare the two and know that Jose has read more. But now we want to know how much more. So we'll go ahead and create a subtraction problem and say that 8 minus 5 equals 3. And that represents this difference in distance or length. So we know that Jose has read 3 more books than Laura. Now part C, it says if Jose, Laura, and Linda read 21 books altogether, how many books did Linda read? And we knew that Jose read 8 and Laura read 5, right? So let's go ahead and work through that part first. That was the tape diagram from the problem before. But we know also down here that 8 plus 5, so Jose's number plus Laura's number equals 13. And then 13 plus what equals 21. And this what is how many books Linda read. So we could do 21 minus 13 here and find that this number is 8. We need 8 more to get from 13 to 21. So Linda read 8 books. And then moving to part D, it says complete the tally chart and the graph. So here we went ahead and we completed the tally chart from the problem before and said, all right, so she read 8 books. That's the same number that Jose read. So we're going to go ahead and put the same number of tally marks into Linda's box here. So that is one group of 5 and then counting on 6, 7, 8. And then the graph to go along with that, we see once again that these would have the same number of circles for Jose and Linda because they read the same number of books, which is 8. Then moving on to our concept development, we see that we can take our application problem and we can turn it sideways. And when we turn it sideways, what do you notice about the picture graph when it is turned this way? It looks a lot like a tape diagram, right? It looks a lot like that part B of that problem that we just solved. We see that we can kind of form this bar right here, and a bar right here that represents those tape diagrams. And you can tell pretty easily just by looking at this graph which has more and which has less, right? Because Laura's is the shortest tape diagram, or in this case, the shortest group in the picture graph. So we see that she just has 5, and then 8, and 8. So we go back to our chart 3 that we worked on in our previous lessons. We go back to our animal classification, and we are going to go ahead and turn this same data into a new graph. We're going to go ahead and work on making this into our bar graph. So here this is our first example of a bar graph. So let's take a real opportunity to look at the different characteristics of this compared to a picture graph. So we know with a picture graph we would just have a dot for each, but now it looks like we've filled in the whole box here, right? And so it's still 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes, and that's what you'll notice with bar graphs. For a bar graph, each box represents that just one space. Each box represents one bird in this case, or one of whatever category we are in. And that's how you count up. So as you cross each line, you're going to the next value. Just kind of like when we used our rulers to measure things. When we got to that tick mark, we knew that this was 1 centimeter, for instance. So in the same way, we know that this is 1 this is 2, this is 3, and then 4. And we can see these numbers down below. Oops, let's wait till that goes away. So we can see the numbers down here below. We can see that it says, go away. We can see it says 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So for instance, for our largest group that I can see here is our mammals. For our mammal group, I see that it ends right at the line that lines up with 8. So that makes me think that this data has 8 mammals in it. This data set has 8 mammals in it. And then I go up here to check to make sure I'm understanding this information correctly, and I am, because I see there's 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 mammals. So that means that this line that's lining up with 8 represents that there are indeed 8 mammals. And we do the same for birds. So we see that this is lining up with the 4. So since it's lining up with the 4, I'm thinking that there are 4 birds. So you're creating, a bar graph is called a bar graph because you're creating this bar right here, or, like we said earlier, it looks a lot like a tape diagram. And then you're coloring it in until you get to the line that lines up perfectly with how many you have, how many you're trying to represent. So in this case, it's 4. And then if I did the same thing with reptiles, I see reptiles has 5. So I would fill in all the way until I get to the line that lines up with 5, and that's what we've done here. Lined up with 5. All right, we'll continue to practice this over the next couple days because this is really important. We want to make sure that we understand how to represent this data. So we can repeat this process for the animal habitats data that we had from a few days ago as well. So we have 4 in the Arctic, 10 in the woodland, and 6 in the ocean. And we represent that data right over here as well. So here we did a vertical bar graph. And it doesn't matter whether you do it horizontal or vertical, whichever way you want to line it up is completely fine. Usually the problem will indicate which way they want it done. But when it comes to you doing this on your own, you can also choose for yourself. And it's going to represent the exact same data. But we see here that Arctic is colored in all the way till it gets to this line. And when I go over to the left to see what that lines up with, I see it lines up with 4. So that is correct because there are 4 animal habitat, or there's 4 animals living in the Arctic habitat. And then when I do the same thing for woodland, I go all the way up until I get to where it stops, and then I go over, and I see that it lines up with 10. And there are 10 in the woodland habitat, so that's correct. And then for the last one, I go all the way up until it stops. I see where this line lines up, and that is for 6. So we can see that as well. We see that's lining up with 6. So you can see by the color-coded boxes how this data is being portrayed. And you can see that it directly lines up with the data we already had, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and work through some of these. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to start applying the information we just worked on to this worksheet. So you can go ahead and just answer the questions down below on a separate sheet of paper, or just think through which choices you would make. So I want you to answer these 6 questions down here below with the information that you have right up here. And you can work on that for the next 2 minutes.